Go Island is brought to you by German Auto Import Network.
It's time once again for our bi-weekly, roughly, conversation with Nanaimo Mayor John Ruttan. We're moving inside the Service and Resource Center today. On today's show, a look at Nanaimo's historical dark side, ocean treasures from Victoria's Fishermans Wharf, and a road trip to Honeyland, Canada. That and more in the next 30 minutes. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. Following every regular City Council meeting here in the Harbour City, we join Nanaimo Mayor John Ruttan in conversation to highlight the previous night's happenings and discussions with the objective of informing you about what's going on in the city that you call home, and also to just give a little bit of education on how municipal politics actually work. Today we're going to talk about Nanaimo Centre Stage, LED signs, Lindley Valley, as well as in-camera meeting policies. All that's still coming in the next 30 minutes. But we're starting, well, maybe a little bit underground today. Hauntings and brutal hangings are all part of Nanaimo's history. Kelly Robinson sheds some light on the sinister side of Nanaimo's history. Lantern tours take place October 18th, 23rd, 25th, and 30th. Pre-registration is required. You can do that by phoning the museum, 250-753. It is 1821-753-1821. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. We're in conversation with Nanaimo Mayor John Ruttan, recapping some of the highlights from Monday night's City Council meeting. LED signs were big on the agenda.
They were big. Primarily the plan by BC Ferries to install two new, fairly large LED signs on their facility here at Departure Bay.
Some of the details on that are, of course, come from the people who will be affected who live in the neighborhood. Well, there was a number of people who brought forward concerns, and some very legitimate ones. But one of our problems was trying to decipher, which were legitimate and which were just perceived problems for them. One of them was the emission of light from these signs, and they were concerned those living up, particularly Beach Drive and little up Bracken Hill, would the light from these signs affect them at night? And there seemed to be quite a number of people that were concerned that it would, and yet BC Ferries did have a representative in the audience. He did come forward and said that they are actually going to have a shroud or a cover around the lights that would mitigate and perhaps, in their opinion, eliminate that light. So what we did after a fairly aggressive discussion about this whole thing is asked that it be returned to staff for further investigation, and that's what happened. Thank you. We'll come back and recap some more of the discussions that took place at Nanaimo City Council on Monday. And we'd just like to note that it's no secret Bill McKay, who sits on council, is the proprietor of a local sign shop. Some people might be wondering if he is now in conflict of interest. And from what I understand, the way that works, it is up to the individual councillor to decide if they are in conflict or not, and for them to choose to not participate in those discussions. So that's just a little bit of information for you on how municipal politics work. We'll be right back after a short break. Still to come today on Go Island, sharing ocean treasures on a boathouse in Victoria, rapid fire with Clipper Jason Argue, and a road trip with the honeybees. That and more still to come today on Go. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. Another point of discussion at Monday, October 7th City Council meeting here in the Harbour City was Lindley Valley. Now, it wasn't officially an agenda item, and it came through in your mayor's report. Well, the concern that I wanted to express last night was that I wanted to make people aware that there is no plan or ability on the part of the city of Nanaimo to buy this very, very large property at Lindley Valley. And, it was zoned for development, which is what's taking place now. It was not on our radar as a place that would be best suited as a park. We try to do an oceanfront or a riverfront or a lakefront, that type of thing. It's a beautiful piece of land, but it's so large, and I just wanted to make sure that people understand that if they do want to become engaged in civil disobedience or damaging the property or the equipment in some manner, that
It will not change our opinion on this thing. We just cannot buy it at this time. And we've spoken with the RCMP, we've spoken with the developer, and give them some of the views that we have on it. I think civil disobedience has a place, but I think the people own this property. It's their own, and they are developing it legally. They have the right to do that, and we're just trying to make sure that those very few members of public who try to take the law into their own hands are aware that this is not a city design, it's not a city plan, and there's no real goal on our part to try to acquire it.
And I guess right now the owners of that property have been giving the public access, and they could take away that access at any point.
Well, that's what it is, and I think that's the fear. First of all, they've been quite open to my way of thinking to allow people with dogs to walk through the property and hikers and anyone wanting to go through it. They haven't made any attempt to stop them from doing so. But it is private land. They do have the right to exercise their authority over it. And I think the message basically is that if there are people that are going to disrupt their business and their plans, then it may mean that everyone will suffer by way of being denied access. And that's unfortunate because it's a beautiful area to walk through. But I don't think the company has any other choice if that sort of thing continues.
Thank you. And I know that development there is going forward. I've heard talk now about what and how the beavers that reside in that area will be removed or dealt with. And I know that there's a lot of people in this community who have some very special emotional attachments to that property. We're going to move on down to Victoria, where some folks at Fishermans Wharf are finding some pretty interesting things below the surface and then attaching them to the side of their houseboat. I remember spending lots of time down at Fisherman's Wharf when I was growing up in Victoria. It certainly has changed over the years. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4 in conversation with Nanaimo Mayor John Ruttan. In-camera process policies and what can be shared when and how was a big discussion last night.
Big discussion, and we've come up with a policy, and I think it's being more reactive to concerns from the electorate and from people out there saying, there's too much in-camera meetings and too much information is withheld. So what we're trying to do now is come up with a policy where we can release it on a regular basis, and we've gone back to 2010. And we've gone pretty well through all of it now, and the Legislative Services Department have gone through and severed, the term is that any names and so on that can't be made public. And then this information will be made public, and it'll go on the city's new website, which is kind of exciting. Mm-hmm. And so people with information or inquiries about information can go on our city website and look up the information. It's not going to be released all at one time. It'll be released over a period of time, but probably in a matter of a few weeks or possibly a couple of months, it'll be all out there for 2010. Then we'll start on 2011. Then we'll start on 2012. And hopefully we'll get to the point where we can release it in a more timely manner. We're cognizant of the fact that the public wants to know what's going on, and it's our commitment as a council to make sure that we can release it as early as we can.
And now what is being released, there's the 3 L's. Litigation, land, and labor. Will some discussions in regards to those 3 things be released once they're no longer sort of active issues?
Yes, probably most of them, but perhaps not all. If there's a lawsuit that has involved the city or been initiated by the city, and there's names of individuals involved that may not be released at any time and may never be released. Land issues are probably more likely to be released, and if the city sees a dangerous intersection, they need to acquire more land around it to expand the turn. Then we don't want to advertise to the public that we're going to buy this land next year. It obviously has a detrimental effect on the value, which seems to go up almost immediately. So that type of thing will be held in camera. But by and large, I think we're going to make a concerted effort to make more information available in a more timely fashion.
Is there a concern that once the public gets a hold of this information that is now an issue that has been put to bed, that it's going to take progress backwards, so to speak, to deal with something that really has already been dealt with?
Well, it could, and that's the chances we take. Public scrutiny and public involvement always carries that risk. But if we have to rehash it and go back through it again, well, so be it. I think we just want to make sure the information's out there, and when it can be released, that's our plan. So yeah, sure, we'll probably have to revisit sometimes more than once on some of these projects, and I guess that's the price of transparency.
Thank you. I think one of the lessons that I've learned in all of these conversations with Nanaimo Mayor over the past months is that nothing is black and white. Nothing is direct or straightforward. And as I've said before, I don't envy the people who are sitting in political seats here in our city. Not an easy job. We're going to throw things over now to Dan Marshall. He is in a rapid fire discussion with Jason Argue. The Clippers face Victoria at Bear Mountain on Friday night. Then they come home to Frank Crane Arena to go up against Cowichan on Saturday night. You can get full details and their schedule, www.nanaimoclippers.com. We'll be back with more right here on Go after a short break. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. We're recapping Monday night, October the 7th, Nanaimo City Council meeting. One big discussion that took place was regarding Nanaimo Center Stage. Put that in context for us.
Well, it's a building owned by the city. It was bought several years ago, and it's designed for a less expensive venue for people that want to stage theater acts and plays, and for younger children to learn how to dance and so on. It's a theater. And so what we're trying to do is find out the least expensive way to maintain the building without draining the public purse. And it's turned into be a bit of a challenge because it's an old building. And like any time you try to repair or rebuild an older building, as soon as you open up a wall and look in, it can be good news or bad news. And so it could be a very big expense. Last night was simply to get a little bit of a contingency established, about $32,000 in the event we uncover something, and that really is what triggered the whole conversation.
So I think the city agreed to pay $160,000 for some external structural repairs that were necessary for safety reasons, and now about 20% has been added on top of that. Is that taking it over budget then?
Well, it's taken over. The original budget was around 160, and this will bring it up to about 195. This was done on the advice of our engineers. They suggested that just in case there is something that they don't anticipate now, but they do later find, to make sure we have the monies in place and the budget planned for that possibility. But it may not be used. I'm hoping it won't be, but we need it there just in case.
Excellent. Thank you. We're going to throw things over to Dunya Tozy. It's time for a road trip to Honeyland Canada Farm. It's all about the bees. That brings us to the end of this edition of Go Island. But before we go, there was a lot of support for a motion put forward on Monday night from City Councillor George Anderson. He's suggesting that Nanaimo put together a youth advisory council. So the city staff are going to start looking into that, and a lot of support for getting youth not only involved in municipal politics, but also having the politicians be more aware of what issues are relevant to the youth in our community. So that's a positive thing that could be coming forward in the next several months. That brings us to the end of this edition of Go Island. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Go Island is brought to you by German Auto Import Network. Clothing supplied by Catwalk Fashions. Kate's Hair and Aesthetics provided by Maffeo Salon.